Today I'm going to be talking about carbohydrates and fat loss and whether or not removing them is a sensible strategy if your goal is weight loss. My name is Jack from Box Nutrition and I help people be the best they can be through a better diet. Does cutting out carbohydrates help you lose fat? This is what I'm going to be discussing today, whether or not it's something that you should be considering or whether it's a complete myth. One of the main rationales behind going low carb is because of something called the insulin hormone hypothesis. And what this states is that once you eat carbohydrates, you produce something called insulin. And insulin actually prevents fatty acids leaving the fat cells. Doesn't sound good. Cut out carbs then. Unfortunately, it's not quite that simple, and there's a few reasons why I say that. Number one, it's not just carbohydrates which causes insulin to rise. Protein itself does this as well. And we know that a diet relatively high in protein helps with body composition and also fat loss goals. Number two, fatty acids leaving the fat cells does not necessarily equate to fat burning. What I mean by this is just by stopping insulin, it does not mean the fatty acids coming out of the fat cells are actually going to be used as fuel. This is because they need to go through one more process called beta oxidation. And if the energy demand is not there, what happens to these fatty acids floating around the body is they get popped right back into the fat cells. So what we need to take from this, it's not about removing the fatty acids from the fat cells, it's being in a negative energy balance. You're expending more calories throughout the day than you're consuming, which is going to help with fat loss. Number three, insulin spikes only last about 10 minutes. So for argument's sake, let's say you eat 4 times a day. This is only going to be 40 minutes over the whole 24 hours where you may be using these fatty acids as fuel. So this is the reason why you need to step back and stop micromanaging your meals and look at the bigger picture, which is being in an energy deficit. So what about all the advocates? What about your friends, your coaches, the people online saying, but I've lost 6 pounds in 3 days? How do you answer that one? That's a good question. We store carbohydrates in the liver and muscle as glycogen, and for every 1 part glycogen, you're going to store 3 to 4 parts water. And what this means, if you have an increase of say 100 grams of carbohydrates, you're also going to have an increase of about 300 to 400 grams of water. This gives a false impression that you've put on fat. And it's the same with dieting. If you reduce your carbohydrates, you're not going to store as much water in the body, giving you a quick drop in weight, which can be misconceived as fat loss, when actually you've just lost water and stored carbohydrates. But the study's shown that low carb diets work. Yes, there is, but unfortunately a lot of these studies don't keep the protein the same between carbohydrates and fats. And we know how important protein is when it comes to fat loss. However, this year there's been a large-scale study which has been released which compared a low-fat to a low-carbohydrate diet. And they kept protein the same. And guess which group lost more weight? They actually lost the same, which was very, very interesting. Which really shows that it's not necessarily cutting out carbohydrates or fat, but cutting food and creating this calorie deficit which leads to weight loss. So don't go low carb. Not necessarily. For some populations, so pre-diabetic, people with metabolic problems who don't deal with carbohydrate particularly well, reducing your carbohydrates can be favourable. It's also quite a simple way to help people control their calories. If we just think about it logically, if I tell someone to remove all their carbohydrates, they're going to take a lot of the staple foods away from their diet. Bread, rice, cereal, pasta. If we cut all this from your diet, guess what happens? You drop calories, thus you're going to lose weight. But also remember, by cutting out carbohydrates, it's also going to remove a lot of the diet as well. What happens if you cut out cakes, biscuits, donuts? You lose weight. And that's not necessarily down to the carbohydrates, but by eating less. And this is the reason why restricting carbohydrates can be an easy strategy to help you cut weight. All that you need to do is reduce 1 portion per day from whatever meal you choose, and this is going to help you get into this calorie deficit. Just remember not to replace it with other food sources. Carbohydrates themselves are not necessarily the cause of fat gain. Eating too much is. However, reducing your carbohydrates can be an effective strategy to help you cut unwanted weight. If you're looking for more help to lose weight, then make sure you download your free copy of Weight Loss Fundamentals by clicking the link below. Until next time, stay healthy.